And then on the Democratic side, you have, the most talked about moment was the whole Bernie Sanders, excuse me, I'm talking here thing. And while it was really one of the funnier moments because I feel like he took that page out of Hillary Clinton's playbook. And if you watch the video of that happening and you look at Hillary Clinton's face when Bernie says that, it looks like somebody who is just completely embarrassed and doesn't know how to respond. Like, hey, wait a minute, that's my move is to pull that role. And it was just hilarious to watch. Now, that is the most talked about moment of the debate, but what I consider to be the most telling were two moments, and they were things that Bernie Sanders said. One was when he was asked about I'm sorry, this wasn't the Fox News town hall, but that's the one that's coming up. But the Anderson Cooper asked him a question about the government failing the people in Flint, Michigan on the water crisis there, and why should those people trust that more government is the solution to their problems. And Bernie gave this really cynical, like he was pissed off answer about, well, why don't we just let the people of Wall Street run it? And he completely missed the point of everything. I mean, he just, every other word out of the guy's mouth is Wall Street. He's just fixated on sticking it to Wall Street. And I think Anderson Cooper asked a brilliant question as something as myself being a libertarian, is that's exactly my stance on things, is why do we need more government to just corrupt and ruin things? And he gave the answer of, well, I mean, I only know one trick, and that's to blame Wall Street. The other thing he said, which was really fascinating, and I don't know how this hasn't been covered enough, was he said that if you're white, you don't know what it's like to be poor. And I'm like, have you not ever seen poor white people before? I mean, I come from, a background of multicultural, and living in a state that's predominantly Hispanic. I mean, you still see poor white people. I mean, I worked at a school for a while doing case management work here in Albuquerque in what we call the war zone. And there were plenty of white kids that went to that school that were poor and who didn't have a lot of basic needs to survive on. So for Bernie Sanders, this out-of-touch 70-year-old white guy who's considers himself to be an outsider yet has been in politics since the 70s, to say such a thing just shows how out of touch he really is and how bad he wants to pander. I mean, say what you want about Hillary's pandering to everybody, that just shows how much he wants to pander to get that black vote. And I found it quite honestly disgusting and disturbing, both his comments, the way he reacted to that Anderson Cooper question about more government, and then the if you're white, you don't know what it's like to be poor thing. And the fact that you don't see it at all. I mean, if any of the Republican candidates who are total douchebags in themselves had said something like that, I mean, you would have seen it everywhere. I mean, anytime any one of them says something semi-controversial, it's all over the trending stuff on Facebook, which I'm fixated on seeing what trends and what doesn't trend. And I was especially fixated after the Democratic debate that didn't pop up, that he said that on the Facebook trending thing. Yet there was, all the different stuff about Donald Trump, which I agree he is a piece of crap, but it's just funny that it wasn't even new. It was stuff about like Saturday Night Live, and there's the Kim Kardashian stuff that's always on there, and it's like we're just going to completely ignore this comment that Bernie Sanders made, which I think goes to show the way Facebook leans. And especially it's disturbing when you look at that is the way a lot of people get their news, and the trending thing, you'll see it pop up all the time. Like like any of the stuff you follow on your Facebook feed, you'll see like trending in so-and-so, and they kind of get to dictate the things you see. It's the same thing Twitter's doing. And if you follow the Twitter war with if you Google search or just go on Twitter and search at Nero and see the battle he's fighting with Twitter, as he is a lead editor for Breitbart.com, very outspoken. He's a gay conservative who's very outspoken about the PC culture and feminists and battling with them. And he actually got his Twitter checkmark taken away by Twitter because they didn't agree with some of the things he said. He didn't break any of their rules, but they just took it away because they didn't agree with him. So, yeah, and also, there was the big news story about the letter that Louis C.K. wrote recently to his email followers, and which is something I found to be very, very good. I mean, I thought this writing of his was genius. I'm a big fan of Louis' stand-up, most of his stand-up and his TV show. I know in the past, like, there's a lot of clips of him on Opie and Anthony back in the day being a real kind of blowhard liberal about things. But some of the things he said, I mean, like the whole part about Trump, comparing him to Hitler, I thought the comparisons were pretty well, especially when he said Germany in the 30s, and that, you know, the Germans then thought the same things that we thought of about Trump early on as well. But what the thing I thought I found most interesting is he says, well, I'm not advocating for Hillary or Bernie. I like them both, but frankly, I wish the next president was a conservative only because we had Obama for 8 years and we need balance, and not because I particularly enjoy the conservative agenda. I just think that the government should reflect the people, and we are about 40% conservative and 40% liberal. When I was growing up and when I was a younger man, liberals and conservatives were friends with differences. They were enemies, and it always made sense that everyone gets a president they like for a while and then hates the president for a while. But if it only works, it only works if the conservatives put up a good candidate. And I mean, spot on comments by Louis C.K. that I 100% agree with. Yeah, so if you haven't gotten a chance yet, I'm sure it's been all over the internet. I mean, with the main headline being that he calls Trump an insane bigot and compares him to Hitler, but there's other good stuff in there that's really, really well, and it's a well-written piece by Louis. And I think that's pretty much some good politics talk for this episode. The two big sports stories going on. The first one being Peyton Manning announcing his retirement. I don't understand how. I mean, maybe he was mulling not retiring, but with the way his body's been handling itself, and B, you know, the story about the HGH, and then the whole story about the sexual assault at University of Tennessee. And then winning the Super Bowl, I felt like this was the absolute perfect time for Peyton Manning to ride off into the sunset. Now, for me, I will always think of Timmy from South Park when I see Peyton Manning, because I just think he looked so much like him. And Peyton Manning, I will always remember as just being one of the greatest statistical quarterbacks that I've ever seen. I mean, there was that streak for a while when he was with the Colts where he was just, I mean, with him and Marvin Harrison and then Reggie Wayne, just the stuff he used to do on a weekly basis was insane. It was like watching Steph Curry. I mean, there was a time where he was that good. Like, it was almost just like what Steph Curry is doing now. I think we kind of forget about that with the recent history and with the fact that he always kind of got labeled a choke artist, even though, I mean, he won 2 Super Bowls, even though the last one, his defense carried him to it. He still won 2, and he's still going to go down as probably a top 5 quarterback of all time. So I think I don't think we'll miss him that much right away because of how bad he was in his final season and with all the neck problems and having to miss a year. But when you really sit back and look at the stuff he did in the mid to early 2000s, you really will start to miss the guy. And the other big story being UFC over the weekend, Miesha Tate beating Holly Holm. Man, it's crazy to think that if Holly could have just somehow avoided that final takedown and just made it that last minute and a half or so out of that match without getting taken down and just kept the match the way it was going, the judges' scorecards all had her winning. She would have won the bout and she would have retained her title. I think that would have been better for UFC too, because then you right away have an automatic rematch, because you could say, well, she won thanks to the judges, but I mean, a lot of people will argue that Miesha Tate should have won that match, and then you get that big build up for the rematch at UFC 200. With Holly losing, you can make a case now that you could maybe give somebody else the next shot and make Holly go back down and maybe fight like a Cyborg or somebody else to get that title shot again. I think Ronda's out of the picture till October, November, so you can't even picture that. And I think Misha's got at least one more fight before then. I think Ronda's going to have to fight somebody before she steps back in the ring to get a title shot. And as far as the McGregor-Diaz fight goes, I think for McGregor losing this match, we might look back on this being one of the greatest things that ever happened to his career. I mean, people were surprised by it, and like I said on this podcast, I wasn't too surprised. I wouldn't have been too surprised if Diaz wins, because Diaz is so much bigger, and with McGregor being a lot smaller. I mean, he went from fighting at 145, was going to fight Dos Anjos at 155, and then instead fought Diaz at 175 with 2 weeks' notice. I think that it shouldn't have been that big of an upset that Diaz won, because Diaz is a good fighter, and I think for McGregor, he's going to learn so much from this experience. I think this will be the only time we ever see him fight at 175, and I think he'll be able to learn from this everything. I mean, the way the match went to, I mean, him coming out in that first round and just blowing off all of his energy, and Diaz just absorbing it all, taking that beating and then just going like, all right, and then giving it to him the second round and ultimately winning by rear naked choke. I think McGregor is going to learn a lot from it. I think Diaz already has, and I think in the end it's going to make McGregor a better fighter, and I gained a lot of respect for McGregor, the way he handled himself, and I gained a lot of respect for Diaz for his post-match comments and just watching him take that beating in the first round, absorbing it, and then giving it right back and ultimately winning that match. And I think the UFC's got a lot of interesting fights coming up, and I wish I was as compelled storyline-wise with WWE as I am with UFC right now. And one of those two companies is fake and nothing but storyline driven. And the other one's done a great job of manufacturing all these stories, and it's been great. So yeah, that's this episode. I hope you enjoyed. Follow, subscribe, tell friends if you like it, and talk to you guys on Thursday. Like it is set that Tuesdays and Thursdays will be the podcast dates, so be on the lookout for that. Every Tuesday and Thursday, follow me at Sir Douglas Case on Twitter to stay up to date on the latest happenings. And God bless America.